Hi guys, how you doing? Thanks for joining us. It's been an interesting few days. My mum has finally got back home very safely. Thank you so much for your well wishes, which I got through text and also email. It really meant a lot to me during this challenging time, and the challenges do continue. Several of you have been in touch with me with regards to what's going to happen with the exams and the assessments, and it is all up in the air at the moment. I don't have any definitive answers, but I'm definitely here for support, and when this chaos settles, be rest assured I'll do my very best to get you through the CSA. So today I thought it might be a good idea for us to start focusing down on the transition between the first and the second half. So far we've covered the story, followed by the symptom, and then the system, which equates to the conversation before it becomes the consultation with some clinical skills running alongside. We talked about the importance and significance of red flags and asking these in context and centering them around a patient's agenda, especially if they have a specific concern. We can use a patient's idea or concern to refocus our thoughts rather than looking for a hidden expectation. So don't push the E in ICE. If it has to be asked, it's got to be in context like any other question. At this point, we need to be thinking actually about the clinical skills aspect, which incorporates also the examination. There's no general examination in the CSA because you're now focused on the system that you're interested in. It's really important that actually in your study groups you get into the habit of making sure you verbalize what examination you want to do, keeping it simple and specific, and actually starting to undertake the examination, because in the exam you physically will have to put hands on patients at least 3 to 4 times, and in study groups you don't do that because you're too nice to each other. But just remember, if you're not challenging each other, then you're actually colluding. So give yourselves a little bit of tough love, whether it's questions out of context or an examination out of context. There needs to be a bit of throwback and challenge there. So coming into the second half of the consultation, the main theme really is ensuring you don't become diagnostic. Remember, management is management of the patient as opposed to the diagnosis. So if a patient had a very specific concern, the first rule is actually readdressing their concern, their agenda, before you share your own thought processes. Your diagnostic brain will want to kick in. As soon as you get the examination findings, your brain will be thinking, what's the diagnosis, what's the diagnosis, what's the diagnosis? But remember, the marks are not there. The marks are with the patient with the diagnosis, if there even is a specific diagnosis. Because remember, what you're being assessed on here is actually the management of risk and how you either contain risk reactively, or if you're going to escalate it, again, that it's escalated in an appropriate manner, which is reactive to the level of risk as opposed to defensive. Recognize that when you are talking with your patients, that is actually what you're doing. You're talking with rather than at, and that actually actions potentially might have reactions. It's a talking exam, so it's a viva, as we talked about in our very first podcast. So if a patient's come in, for example, with a headache that they're not particularly concerned about, but actually as you take the history, red flags are beginning to accumulate. When you examine the patient, there are red flags in the context of the physical signs, for example, papilledema, and you're now considering that actually this headache is more serious than originally anticipated. It might actually require a 2-week wait. How are you going to present that to your patient? Because that action is going to potentially have a reaction. Your diagnostic brain will want to talk about a 2-week wait. But guess what? That patient, they are not anticipating to be talking about a 2-week wait at all. So there are 3 rules really into coming into the second half. The first is to readdress the patient's agenda. Mr. Smith, I appreciate when you came in today you thought this was possibly a migraine, but actually the first thing to say is I don't actually think we're dealing with a migraine here. That's the first rule. The second rule is then sharing your thought processes as to why. This may be because the examination findings are not completely normal, and these are findings that we need to look into. And then the third rule is committing to risk, serious or not serious. But it's very important you commit to this sensitively. Mr. Smith, there's a possibility we might be dealing with something a bit more serious than just a migraine. Now the analogy here is you entering a swimming pool. There's a shallow end and a deep end. The shallow end is how you commit to risk. The deep end is the working diagnosis. And when you're nervous, you won't want to swim. So our next podcast will look very much at this aspect of how we swim with uncertainty, recognizing that our actions will have reactions and recognizing that we need to stay afloat in that swimming pool with our patient. Once again, this is quite therapeutic for me, just doing these podcasts. I hope you're finding them useful, and I do really wish you guys the very best during these tough and challenging times, both at a professional and personal level. I know some of you have had real issues with not just the assessments, but on family fronts, relatives that are unwell, in hospital. My prayers are with you, and I really hope to catch up very soon. All right, take care for now.